So, excuse me, just wanted to say right off the bat, this is probably going to be a little bit longer of a video than I've normally done. This is going to be a little bit more of an in-depth detail on DK, especially on the different classes. I'm sure a lot of people are maybe not too happy with the direction of the patch. I will say that in terms of abilities like Venomous Claw, I would say that Venomous Claw in terms of a debuff, or such as a dot, definitely does need a bit of help. It is fairly weak, but in terms of build variety for the Stamina Dragonknight, what I would say is that the build, in terms of variety of gameplay, would play just fine in its current PTS form. The reason being is because you're going to have more than enough damage comboing, Wrecking Blow into a Stone Fist into an alt while utilizing Fossilize as a CC while maintaining Noxious as basically a little bit of peppering some damage in there. The damage over time, I would say, could use a slight buff, but they nerfed Puncture as a utility. They made it so that it either does damage reduction, damage increase. I would say they could give it. I would say that it's just fine because it does upfront damage, it does damage over time, and it gives you an AOE fracture. And I would say that's more than enough for a utility ability if that is the direction that ZMX is looking to go. Let me just turn this sound down a little bit. There we go. Much better. So I would say in terms of utility, if you're looking at the DK abilities in terms of utility, I would say that having Noxious deal the amount of damage that it does in light of the change to abilities like Puncture. Puncture was changed so that it no longer does the amount of damage that it used to do, where it could be easily weaved, via light attack, ransack, bash combos. And I would say that in its current state, Noxious does actually a better job than Puncture does, as Puncture deals less damage, and of course you do gain the minor protection, but you'll do more damage over time. I think my only problem is that it's over 14 seconds. I would say you could reasonably move that down to 10 seconds, or even 8 seconds, and it would be fine. Or probably what most people have an issue with is the duration. And I would say if the ability is designed to last for 14 seconds, then you can reasonably up the damage to something like, at the very least, would be around, I would say at least 1k per second, so that in PvP it's going to tick for about 500 damage per second. Of course, it deals the upfront damage. I would leave the upfront damage as it is, because the primary purpose of it is to of course provide you the utility of the major fracture, of an AoE fracture. I think if players wanted something a bit more out of the ability, I would say maybe increase the chance to proc the stamina combustion version, which is when you apply poison to an enemy, you restore 500. If anything, you could fix these abilities that players are not quite happy that got what they feel to be overly nerfed, and you can buff them by increasing their stamina regen or give them something else via the combustion passive. I would say that the amount of damage that Venomous Claw, for how much it costs, is probably not enough. I would say reduce the duration to 10 seconds and make it, and I think that would be enough, or maybe like a slight increase, like I said, to about 1,000 per second, because you still have the ability where it will still ramp up for 12 seconds, and then of course have it paired with the combustion passive for increased regen. I would think that would be fine. Stam DK in this patch, in light of the Dragonhold patch, is actually burstier than it is in the previous patch, and I should say in the current patch, which is the Scalebreaker patch, and it's primarily related to the way you can animation cancel Stone Fist, which I've showed. It's very easy to gain a high amount of burst where you can gap close, light attack, And then, well, these mobs just don't have enough. But you can animation cancel their light attack into a dizzy, into an animation cancel light attack, into a stone fist, and it deals a lot of damage because typically you're going to have, I mean, looking at this particular build, I predominantly play no CP, and looking at this particular build on no CP, you can see how much the ability does here, where, right, critical rush 5,000, and currently on live the wrecking blow damage is just shy of 12k. That's going to be nerfed by about 16%, so at the very least in no CP you're looking at a 12k wrecking blow. And on live, I mean, I should say on the PTS, the unbuffed stone fist, and of course this is not fully morphed, but not fully morphed, I should say, not fully morphed, but not fully leveled up, you'll see that the difference is about 16, it's about 15%. So fully buffed up, my wrecking blow, at least in this non-CP, like my CP is not allocated very well for this particular build, right? Fully buffed up, I'm at 13, I don't even think that's fully buffed. I forgot to put in. Alright, so fully buffed up, we're looking at 14k and a 12k stone fist. That's more than enough damage when you think about it. Between a wrecking blow, whichever more, wrecking blow, you gain the 40% increase on the light attack, which means that your light attack is going to hit fairly hard, especially because they buffed the light attacks, and light attacks deal decent amount of damage. And so you're rotating in with a wrecking blow. The other thing that you can do, which will increase the amount of damage that your stone fist does, is a simple heavy attack because of the passive from 2H right here, right? Follow up deals an additional 10% damage, right? So if my stone giant is coming in at about 12k, that means all I have to do is heavy attack, and now my stone giant is going to be around 14k, because I'm going to gain an additional 10%, so I'm going to gain at least another 1200, so I'm going to sit just shy fully buffed of 14k. That's a lot of damage, especially after a 14k wrecking blow. Again, this build is not optimized for CP. This build is designed for no CP. My no CP wrecking blow is on live just shy of 14k. It is going to be nerfed by about, I think the PTS and patch notes said 16%. So it's going to be 10k in no CP. It's going to be 10k on no CP for the next patch of Dragonhold, which means that my stone giant is going to sit about 15% lower than that, so it's going to be about 8,500 in no CP. That is a lot of damage to literally combo in between a wrecking blow light attack followed into a stone fist. That is roughly 25k in the span of about 1.5 seconds, because it's real easy to combo where you can light attack, wrecking blow, right, and it all went off. You just didn't see it. It all went up. The only thing that you saw was the animation cancel where my character basically bashed with the two-handed weapon. But what you didn't see was you didn't see the only thing that you saw was the the wrecking blow swing, and then the animation cancel light attack bash into a stone fist. That's a lot of damage that you're just not seeing. In my opinion, as a long-term player, that's probably too much damage, because think about it. On live, this is going to hit in no CP for 10k. You're going to have another 8,500 coming out of Stone Fist, plus the light attack, plus the bash. The light attack and the bash is going to be at least 5k, at least combo together. So you're looking at 10k plus 8,500 plus an additional 5k in the span of what you just saw. That's a lot of damage. I would say that StamDK in terms of burst is actually going to be just fine. The other gameplay styles, of course, like I said before, in terms of if you're running, for example, see if I have a sword and shield build that I can show. Okay, I do. So looking at, just grab this. In terms of StamDK, let's say we're running, let's say you wanted to play sword and shield. I've already shown how easy it is, again, because Power Slam on live, and we can just go ahead and take a look at a build that I released for Stam DK, showing in heavy armor what kind of build you can run. Go right here, go down here, we'll go to the 7th Stonekeeper build. Just looking at this particular build, you've got an 8200 Power Slam. Again, you could use Power Slam, drop Venomous Claw, and you can easily put in Stone Fist right there. Again, on live right now, Venomous Claw does a lot of damage over time. On the PTS, it does absolutely no damage. So you can easily remove Venomous Claw for more burst. It actually would give you a little bit of range, because now you'd have a Stone Fist that you can apply range damage from. And then once you're in your opponent's face, it's very easy to weave Power Slam. Perfect example. You can see there is an animation to it, and there it is right there. It's probably a little bit difficult to see, but you'll hear like the double stun. Let's see if I can find the better. And so you can still utilize Noxious Breath for the fracture. And I don't know why they went and nerfed Puncture, right? I mean, if their whole idea was to nerf Puncture so that you couldn't do this, you can still do that, right? You can still do that. So if that was their goal, was for have players not be able to weave damage so easily, I would say, if anything, they made it more skillful and more damage oriented. As you can see, because the players were doing this before, and then now you can do. Right, so if their goal was to not have players be able to weave that kind of damage with a sword and shield, I would just say all you did was made it so that only more skillful players will be able to utilize a build like this, while less skillful players actually wouldn't be able to utilize it, because it actually is slightly harder to weave. Because the animation is slightly different. It's much easier to push the bash on a ransack, because the animation doesn't have this little bit of a delay. So you have to pay attention to the delay, and then as soon as you start to see the animation, you go ahead and bash, and you still gain the extra bonus damage from the bash. Yes, they changed the amount of damage where it's no longer percent related, but in terms of weaving, for weaving purposes, this is much easier to weave, right? You can sit here and you can weave this all day. Whereas this ability is a little bit more harder, but of course once you master it, it actually has greater damage potential. Wish I had my add-ons so I could actually see the damage coming through much easier. There it goes. You kind of have to listen for the double bash, right? Because you'll hear that. So it does take a little bit of practicing. It is slightly harder than animation canceling for Puncture or whichever morph that you were using, but in terms of actual gameplay and damage potential, Sword and Board Stam DK is absolutely fine. There's nothing wrong with Sword and Board Stam DK either on this patch or in the coming patch, and I've already shown that you can run a Sword and Board Stam build and still push out over 7,000 weapon damage potential, especially, and this is a heavy armored build. There's absolutely nothing wrong with Stam DK in terms of running either a Sword and Board build or in running, for example, a 2H and bow. I mean, the only thing you're really going to be utilizing the bow is for the dodge roll for the major expedition from the bow, as poison injection is kind of nerfed. But that's typically what you would use it for, you know, outside of, for example, the execute from poison injection. But what you can replace it with is more burst, and that's really simple on this particular build on my Tavis champion that I'm actually currently working on because I haven't leveled my Sigic order. You can replace poison injection with imbued weapon, and I'll show you right here exactly why. Looking at sword and looking at the build right here, you can see how much it does. Fully buffed up are at 7,800. So you're gonna outpace the dot damage from poison injection because you're coming in with so much burst between you know, the light attack, the glyph, as well as the crushing weapon proccing into a gap close, into a light attack, wrecking blow, into an alt. Like the build is designed around burst. So you don't need the actual poison injection, because the vast majority of the damage is going to come in via burst instead of damage over time. But I would say what is going to be hurting for next patch in the Dragonhold is going to be heavy armored stam DK in terms of dot build. I would say that heavy armor dual wield dot builds actually overperform, and I'll show you right here. You've already seen this is a medium armored build, right? This is a medium armored build running 5100 or so weapon damage, and this is mostly reliant on dizzy swing. And you can see right here what the effective weapon damage is on this particular build. The other build that I showed you was a heavy armor build with about 4700 weapon damage. This build has almost 4800 weapon damage. This is a heavy armored build with decent health recovery, good amount of no CP, and this is a no CP build, and you're seeing that the effective weapon damage is 7100, right? So it's slightly less, even though the weapon damage is just a little bit closer to it. But of course, not being a medium, I don't have the crit, I don't have the extra 15% to my weapon damage. So the overall amount of damage output, the overall effective weapon damage is a little bit lower. But if you actually look at dual wield stam DK, you'll see a Thrives in Chaos build. That build comes in at almost 7700. Even though I'm running roughly, I'm still in heavy armor, I actually have a little bit less weapon damage, but the overall effectiveness of dual wield dot builds are actually higher. Now, I would say that's probably why ZeniMax went and nerfed him, because you can take a look currently in this patch. You'll see I'm at 7700. This build actually can go much higher because of things like Thrives in Chaos, because Thrives in Chaos increases your overall damage percent-wise, right? It's not like, for example, if you're utilizing something like, right, Dawnbreaker, the Dawnbreaker that gives you the extra weapon damage. That weapon damage only scales right here, right? So the extra 300 that you get, DK has both major and minor brutality, so it'll push this weapon damage to an extra 400, but it's only going to push the effective weapon damage by 400, because it's not a percent increase, it's a flat increase. And so the overall change in the effectiveness of the amount of damage output is only 400 weapon damage. But Thrives in Chaos on just one person, right? We'll take a look at that right here. Let's pop open the old calculator. And so for this particular build, that is 7700. It's 7700 effective weapon power, which is what Thrives in Chaos increases. And it increases that by 0.6%, by 6%, right? So it's time 0.06, which is roughly 462 weapon damage, which is more than what Flawless Dawnbreaker with the buff and slotted gives you, because you'll gain 3% from Flawless Dawnbreaker, as well as the extra 300, which of course is buffed by major and minor brutality. So that turns into roughly 400 plus an additional 3% from having another Fighter's Guild ability slotted. So it's only going to be a slightly less than just hitting one person with Thrives in Chaos. But each person that you hit with Thrives in Chaos, for example, if you were to hit 4 people, then this would be multiplied by 4. So for example, if you're in a BG, you would gain an additional 1850 increase to your effective weapon damage. It's like adding more than 1800 weapon damage to it's like adding 1800 weapon damage, because it's a percent increase. Plus this heals you. Plus it increases all of your damage, not just your weapon damage. The only thing that it doesn't do is, of course, increase your healing. It just increases your total damage output by a percent, which is where things like Nightblade, why Nightblade is so strong, because Nightblade, when it uses Incap or when it uses the other morph, it increases all of its damage by 20%, and that's why Nightblade for so long has been so strong. It's why they complained about them removing a percent increase from having, what's it called, removed? Is it minor berserk? Because minor berserk is a flat 8% increase. It's not an 8% increase to your weapon damage, it's an 8% increase your effective power, which is basically an 8% across everything that you do. And that's why Nightblade's complain so much, because that's a huge nerf in terms of their effective output. And since it's percent based, right? Since it's percent based, the bigger your starting percent, the bigger your starting number is, right? If I could get this to 8,000 and then add the 6%, then obviously the overall end goal is higher. That's why so many people complain about it being nerfed, and that's why you should not have percent increases into your game. You should have flat changes, which is exactly what they did with Sword and Shield. They removed, or is it, I think it was a Sword and Board, or was it Deadly Bash? So Deadly Bash previously was a 20% flat increase to the amount of damage when you could bash. And of course, that created problems with the Necromancer ult. So what they did was, they only added a certain amount of weapon damage. That weapon damage only affects here, and only affected that one particular ability, which is when you bash your target. It doesn't affect your overall output, like for example Thrives and Chaoses. It's why I always say, if you're running dual wield, especially because most people are running the Flawless Dawnbreaker for the extra weapon damage, the extra weapon damage that you get is not as good as one tick on one person of Thrives and Chaos. And it's like, people just don't understand it. People just run flaws. Even if someone, for example, is using Dizzy Swing and they're using Berserker and they're using Onslaught is going to give you the flat penetration. The penetration is better than the actual extra weapon damage. The only difference is that if you're fighting someone who's using a dual wield build and they hit you with an Onslaught, you hit them with a Thrives and Chaos, you'll be able to out heal them, which is why I typically tell people, if you're running dual wield, want to be running Thrives and Chaos over running, for example, Flawless Dawnbreaker. It is the better choice for just straight damage output, healing, and an overall effectiveness of the amount of damage that you do. What I would say is that in terms of next patch, unfortunately, because Venomous Claw is not going to deal any damage, Blood Craze isn't going to deal any damage, as well as, for example, Trap. Trap is also going to get basically thrown out the window, so you're losing a large amount of damage. So dual wield dot stam DK in terms of a playstyle kind of went out the window. If that doesn't change within the next patch, this particular playstyle is dead, because basically stamina DK, at least this particular build running dual wield dot attrition playstyle, has gone out the window because they overly nerfed all the dots. There's absolutely nothing you can do. There's absolutely nothing you can do about that. Whoops. Killed by the stupid NPCs. There's absolutely nothing that you can do about that next patch if they don't change it. So in terms of stamina DK dot play style, dual wield, utilizing abilities like Twin Slashes, Noxious. I mean, Noxious is still useful. It's just not as strong as it is on live. And then of course, Claw is just not worth the slot anymore. So I would say, if you're looking to play Stam DK for the Dragonhold patch, dual wield 2H and Bow plays just fine. I would say 2H and Sword and Shield plays just fine. Those are two play styles that you can still play. I would say 2H and Bow, or 2H if you're going, for example, 2H as your main with a Sword and Shield in your back bar. That gameplay style is fine. If you're playing with a two-handed on your back bar for the buffs, and you're utilizing primarily Sword and Shield as your main form of damage, that playstyle remains preserved. But I would say the only playstyle that did get nerfed would primarily be like dual wield and bow. Dual wield and bow, because you no longer have the dot execute, you no longer have the stun, you no longer have the dot damage. That playstyle got currently, in the current patch, is completely removed. What I would say is that in terms of utilization of things like corrosive still works just fine. I mean, it did need to be nerfed. For people who complained that were like, oh, like you literally gutted, the dot gameplay, I would say that play style needed to be gutted, because you can literally, it was far too easy to just sit there, dot multiple people up, pop corrosive, and everybody takes true damage. Like, that was just overperforming. And if that's the gameplay that you played, and you were complaining that it got nerfed, then you were playing an overperforming playstyle that needed to be nerfed, and you were being carried by that playstyle. And if you can't adapt, then it's probably because you needed to be carried, and maybe you have some learn to play issues. But I'm actually glad that they nerfed it. I had played it before, which is why I didn't use corrosive on that particular build. Another playstyle that is preserved, I would say, would be Bobo DK, which still plays just fine. Looking at the bow skill line, you'll see the damage for barrage. I think that will still deal enough damage. I didn't utilize snipe. I'm not sure that I did want to check to see if they nerfed the amount of damage. Okay, unbuffed. So I think it would be just fine, because I use Silver Leash as my main spammable. One thing that I did like that got changed was the change to Molten Armaments, which now gives you both Major Brutality and Minor Brutality passively. So it gives you Major Brutality up front. On the build that I ran in BGs, I had to utilize pots mostly for to gain Major Brutality. And now I don't have to use it. Now I don't have to do that. Because they nerfed Poison Injection, I'm actually okay with that, because it actually gives me the opportunity to work something else in. So my old bow build, I'll show right here. If you want to take a look, I posted, people were like, is Bobo DK viable? And I presented a build here that had ridiculously high effective weapon damage for a bow gameplay, coming out at almost 6,000 weapon damage for a bow build on my same character, on my red guard. That, of course, is right there. The effective damage of this build is almost 8,600. It's 8,553, coming in at almost 6k weapon damage. This is a medium armored bow gameplay build that didn't revolve around snipe. This build in the current patch is preserved because a lot of these abilities did not get nerfed. What did get nerfed was acid spray as well as lightweight trap in terms of the damage. So what that would actually allow me to do is remove lightweight trap, and I'd still retain the buff here, right? Because I would still want the buff for minor force, right? So I can still utilize it here. So now I have two different ways to gain both minor force. This gives you both minor force as well as I could utilize the other morph, so right here, race against time, because I was not using forward momentum. So now I have access to race against time, which I can put on my back bar, right? Poison injection got gutted. Drain shot still works the same. The only difference is that it no longer stuns. So this gives me access to a slow, which I lost because they removed the slow from silver shards. So I actually gained the slow back on drain shot while still preserving the extra damage. The only thing, of course, that I would need to utilize is I'd probably have to toss in what's it called? Petrify, fossilize, so that when someone gets close to me, I'll have the ability to fossilize them. It is expensive because I am using Kina I was using Kina on this build as well, but I could either utilize this. Again, this is with the Kina proc, of course. The actual skill cost is much lower, as you can see right here. It's 40, 50 with Kina up. And of course, that just requires learn to play issues in terms of timing. But in terms of the actual effectiveness of bow DK, it still plays just fine. I won't have to utilize pots anymore because this will give both major brutality as well as minor brutality passively, major brutality active as well as returning stamina. Even though the arrow barrage got nerfed, its primary purpose of it was to pull Nightblades out, and of course I ran the glyph on the back bar, so when you're dropping arrow barrage, it helps to keep your weapon glyph that's on your back bar up 100% of the time. So in terms of the effectiveness of this build, bow DK is still preserved. So I think the only build that would not be viable currently in the PTS would be dual wield and bow, with dual wield and of course dots as your main form of damage. But like I said before, sword and board DK, in terms of sword and board as your main form of DPS, works just fine. If you're looking for like a double bow gameplay on DK, works just fine. If you're looking for two-handed and bow DK, that will work just fine. Or if you were playing, for example, 2H with your as your main, and then having Sword and Shield on your backboard for the buffs, that playstyle is preserved. So currently, for the next patch, I would say it works out just fine. In terms of magicka DK, unfortunately, magicka DK did get gutted pretty bad because it primarily relies on engulfing, as well as utilizing embers for the heal. Primary problem that you're going to end up having is that embers is not going to heal the way it used to, and in the current PTS you actually have to have enough log over. You actually have to run a minimum of 3,300 spell damage to gain the overall utility of not just of what's it called, engulfing, to gain the maximum amount, to gain the 10%. So that kind of playstyle where DK is like whittling, magicka DK is kind of whittling people down with dots. Again, like I said before, dot builds, at least in the current state, are not viable, which means magicka DK is going to have to change the way it plays. And I would say that the easiest way to still play magicka DK would be to play magicka DK as a hybrid, whether in heavy armor or whether in medium armor, and it would play just fine. It would transition actually from a more attrition dot playstyle to more relying on burst, and it had nothing to do with utilizing molten whip. Right, so on the current patch, you can see right here, engulfing is only based off of, it says affected enemies take more damage from more flame attacks based on your spell damage with a maximum of 10%. Unfortunately, and it tells you current value is 1%. That's because I have no items. Right? I have no items on this character, so because I don't have enough spell damage. So let's say, just say for example, toss in truth. I think I have a truth sword somewhere. There we go. Alright, so now I'm sitting at 1900 spell damage, and then looking at the amount of, it's 5%, right? So it's a maximum value of 5%, and that's typically what you're going to utilize engulfing for anyway. What did get really nerfed is burning embers, and unfortunately, because the healing is based off of the damage done, magicka DK currently took a huge nerf in its ability to heal. But I would tell people that if you wanted to run and still play magicka DK, you'd have to play magicka DK and you'd have to play it as a hybrid. And I posted a build here on battleofthebuild.com. There's an update to it on my YouTube for those who are interested for the next patch in playing magicka DK. It's the Enfuego build. I will be updating this for the next patch. I'm just waiting to see if they do make any further changes. But this is actually a medium hybrid magicka DK that still utilizes. I've actually made changes on the build itself. Take a look at it right here. Taking a look at my Enfuego build that I posted. There's a video on it on my YouTube. You can check it out. So right here, you can see the effective spell power for this build is almost 8100. And I already talked about, and this is no CP, right? This is a no CP build where I had already talked about. Typically, you want to see builds, at least a competitive build that deals enough damage is typically going to sit around 7,000 effective. Whether it's a magicka build, it's going to sit at an effective weapon damage of 7,000. And if it's a weapon, if it's a stand build, it typically wants to at least sit at 7,000 if you want to be able to kill people fairly reliably in a BG setting. This particular build, as you can see, has almost an 8,100 effective spell power and a 9,200 effective weapon damage. And you can see here, like I said before, like on the video, the flame lash is coming in at 10k, and this is a no CP, right? I do not have any CP allocated, as you can see right here. This build is designed around more burst with adding in whirling blades for the execute, and a lot of your damage is going to come from Flames of Oblivion, Dragonfire Scales, and of course CCing into double whip with access to Flawless DB. If that's what you're looking for, if you're going to be looking to play magicka DK, this is one of the playstyles that I would recommend that will still be viable playing it as a hybrid. As you can see here, coming in at almost 6,200 weapon and spell damage. The other version of this build would be my heavy armored. It's this one right here. And so if you wanted to play more of a heavy armor damage oriented build, then you play this one right here. This one is coming in at an effective spell power of almost 7,500 with an effective weapon damage of almost 6,700. And of course, that's utilizing, you can see the Flame Lash proc right here is coming in at 9,400. And then looking at, I utilized Stone Fist previously. They nerfed it and I think they buffed it with this coming patch, because it used to hit fairly hard way back when I first created this build, like over a year ago. Engulfing, you'll still deal enough damage because your spell damage is high enough, right? You only have to run a minimum of 3,300. We're at 4,800, and of course you have access to rapid regen, and then of course DB as well as light giver, and of course you can see the flames of ability. So this is a heavy armored build. You can see the spell resistance right here, the physical resistance right here, almost 2,600, 29.5 for spell resistance. So again, if you're looking to play the magicka DK playstyle, you're more than likely going to be leaning towards hybrid with Pellinals, either heavy Pellinals or medium Pellinals, in terms of being able to still do damage and still secure kills while maintaining, you know, the heal from whip. This obviously is a bit more of a tanky, more conservative playstyle. You know, the Enfuego build is designed for maximum burst. So that entirely depends on what your playstyle is. If you're a magicka DK and you're looking to burst people down, but play the risk reward, then you go with the Enfuego build. If you're looking for a little more of a frontline conservative build, then you would go with this build, which is more designed around heavy armor, you being a little bit more of a juggernaut for this particular playstyle. In terms of, that's about it that I have for the DK class. I will be coming back with another review for the coming patch. We'll have to wait and see what ZeniMax wants to do. In my particular opinion, they really need someone both at the top and at the middle that knows what they're doing in terms of how to create builds, finding out where builds are overperforming, see where builds are underperforming, try to bring the underperforming ones up and bring the overperforming builds down. I am Infamous, right? I am the creator of battleofthebuild.com. If you're looking for more builds for ESO, be sure to check out battleofthebuild.com. It's your #1 source for battleground playstyle. Of course, also if you're looking for a variety of builds for all of the builds, whether you play stamina magic or hybrid, they're all builds that I played. Typically, I've got a lot of gameplay for these different builds, or YouTube video talking about what it is that makes these builds very viable. I always go in depth on all of the builds and why I picked these skills, why I picked these particular sets. Feel free to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. Take care. God bless.